The cardboard box lands at my feet with a thud that echoes through the hallway. My name is Evelyn Price, and I've just been fired. 4 hours ago, HR walked me out with a termination letter and a security escort. Now, standing in my brother's driveway, I'm watching him dump the rest of my belongings like they're garbage. 1 week, I plead, my voice barely steady. Just give me 1 week to find a place. Adrian doesn't even look at me. He throws another box down the concrete steps, and I hear glass break inside. That's my grandmother's china. The china he asked me to keep safe 3 years ago. You should have planned better, he says, his tone cold and flat. He wipes his hands on his pants like touching my things has contaminated him. I stand there watching my entire life collapse in real time. My job, my home, my dignity, all of it gone before sunset. What I don't know yet is that Adrian didn't do this out of heartlessness alone. He threw me out because he needed me gone. And in exactly 8 months, he would regret that decision more than anything he's ever done in his life. But on that day, I just gathered my boxes and loaded them into my car. The neighbors watch from their porches like it's the neighborhood entertainment. Mrs. Chen from across the street pretends to water her garden, but her eyes track every box I carry. The teenage kids playing basketball stop shooting. Even their ball sits still on the driveway. My mother stands in the kitchen window, refusing to make eye contact with me. She won't come out. She won't defend me. She just turns away, and that somehow hurts worse than Adrian's cruelty. My brother stands in the open garage door, arms crossed. His face a mask of fake concern for any observer. To them, he probably looks like he's reluctant to do this. This is humiliating, I say quietly to myself, loading another garbage bag into my trunk. It wouldn't be if you'd kept your job, Adrian calls out loud enough for everyone to hear. My phone buzzes. Another notification from my email. I already know what it says. HR's termination email is permanently burned into my brain. Due to performance-related compliance failures and security violations, your employment is terminated effective immediately. But I didn't cause those failures. And I didn't commit those violations. Someone set me up. And as I drive away from that house in my beaten-up Honda, sitting in my car in some empty Walmart parking lot, I'm about to start figuring out who. 3 days earlier, my job was perfect. I worked in compliance at Meridian Financial Services. For 5 years, I'd been meticulous. Every audit passed. Every file organized. Every regulation followed to the letter. My supervisors called me reliable, trustworthy. Then the audit started. On Tuesday morning, my boss, James, walked into my cubicle with a face like stone. We need to talk about these failed compliance checks. What failed checks? I asked, genuinely confused. He pulled up files on his laptop. Documents I'd supposedly reviewed and approved. Except I hadn't. I'd never seen them before in my life. My heart started pounding. Not the fast panic of someone caught. The slow, cold dread of someone being framed. These are flagged in the system under your credentials, James said, scrolling through timestamp after timestamp. All submitted between 2 and 4 a.m. on nights when you reported working from home. I'd been home those nights, yes. But I'd been asleep. My computer had been off. Someone's using my login, I said, the words tumbling out. James, I promise you, I didn't touch these files. He closed the laptop slowly. The look in his eyes wasn't anger. It was worse. It was disappointment. We're going to investigate, he said finally. But Evelyn, this looks bad. When I started digging through my own account history that night, I found something that made my blood run cold. Someone had accessed my login from an IP address I didn't recognize. Multiple times. Always late at night. Always from the same location. I pulled up that IP address on a mapping tool. It belonged to my brother's office building. The next morning I called Adrian. Hey, can we grab coffee? I need to talk to you about something. He agreed immediately. Too immediately. Like he was expecting the call. We met at a cafe near his office, and I watched him carefully. I'd never really looked at my brother as a threat before. He was just Adrian. The ambitious one. the one who started his own consulting firm 3 years ago. "So," he said, sipping his latte with a casual smile. "Rough week at work?" My stomach dropped. "How did you know?" "Your mom mentioned something. You know how she talks." He waved his hand dismissively, but his eyes were sharp, watching, waiting to see what I knew. I decided to test him. "Actually, I've been having some security issues at work. Someone's been accessing my login credentials." I watched his face carefully. For one split second, just one, his jaw tightened. Then the smile returned. "That's serious," he said smoothly. "I've had similar problems with my consultants. Actually, speaking of which, I've got someone working with us who has amazing connections at your company." "How did he know about the audit?" "Who's your consultant?" I asked, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "Just a contact. Someone good at getting inside information." He smiled. "Why is that relevant?" I left that coffee shop knowing with absolute certainty that my brother had sabotaged me. But I couldn't prove it yet. And I needed proof. I needed to be smart about this. I couldn't just accuse him. I needed him to hang himself. That night, I slept in my car in a parking garage. The Honda's back seat isn't designed for sleeping. My neck screamed. My back felt like someone had driven nails through it. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the mental clarity I was experiencing. I sat in the darkness, watching the occasional car pull in and out, and something inside me shifted. The panic, the shame, the desperate need to fix things. All of it crystallized into something cold and pure. Not anger. Anger clouds judgment. This was focus. I decided right then, in that dark parking garage at 3 a.m., that I wouldn't defend myself to my brother. I wouldn't confront him. I wouldn't cry or beg or try to convince anyone of the truth. Instead, I would gather evidence. I would watch him. I would wait. And when I had everything I needed, I would move with surgical precision. My brother had thrown me out at the lowest moment of my life, thinking I was broken. But he'd made a critical mistake. He'd shown me exactly who he was. And now I was going to show the world. I pulled out my phone and opened a new email account, one he would never be able to trace back to me. One single thought circled my mind as I lay in the back of my car. "You have no idea what you just started." The first thing I did was get a job. Any job to stabilize myself. I found temp work at a coffee shop. The pay was terrible. The hours were exhausting. But it gave me a paycheck and a reason to be out in the world during normal hours. More importantly, it gave me time to build my case. Using my personal laptop at night, I submitted a formal data request to Meridian's HR department. The request was legal, specific, and couched in language I knew they couldn't refuse. I was asking for my own personnel file and system activity logs. When the files came through, I spent 3 nights analyzing them on my kitchen table in the cramped apartment I'd rented. Patterns emerged. Someone had accessed my login credentials from that same IP address 47 times over a 6-month period. Every access occurred between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. Every single one corresponded with compliance files being reviewed and approved. But I'd kept my own personal backup of my login activity. The timestamps on those file reviews didn't match the actual work I'd done. My computer had been off. My network connection had been idle. But my credentials had been active. I created a spreadsheet. IP addresses. File names. Everything was documented. Then I reached out to a cybersecurity friend from college. I asked hypothetically, if someone stole your login credentials and used them to make changes to financial files, how would that show up in a system audit? He explained patiently exactly what would appear in the logs, exactly what would be traceable, exactly what would prove that someone else had been the one doing the actual work. Everything he described matched what I was seeing in my data. I saved everything to an encrypted drive. Multiple backups. Secure cloud storage. This was my insurance policy. 2 weeks after I lost my job, I looked up my brother's business contracts publicly. His consulting firm, Crosspath Solutions, published their client list on their website. I scrolled through it slowly, my coffee getting cold beside me. Meridian Financial Services. The contract was listed as starting exactly 1 week before my termination. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. I dug deeper, using public records and careful internet searching. The contract was worth $180,000 for external compliance consultation and risk assessment, according to the proposal I found. But there was more. I pulled up the timeline of my brother's business expenses. Right after his Meridian contract was signed, he'd purchased new office equipment, upgraded his software, hired 2 new junior consultants. My termination had funded his growth. I sat there staring at my screen and something snapped into focus. This wasn't just personal betrayal. This was systematic fraud. My brother had deliberately sabotaged an employee, his own sister, to eliminate a perceived threat and position himself as the solution. He'd created the problem, then sold the fix. I started applying for jobs everywhere. Every compliance position, every financial services role, every opportunity that remotely matched my experience. I wasn't picky anymore. 6 weeks of rejection emails. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Ms. Price. This is Sophia from Northcrest Compliance Recruitment. I'm looking at your resume and I'm impressed. Really impressed. Would you be open to a conversation? 20 minutes later, I had a phone interview scheduled. Sophia was thorough. She asked about my experience, my qualifications, my goals. She didn't ask about why I'd left Meridian. I want to be honest with you, I said toward the end of the call. I was recently terminated from my last position. The official reason was performance-related. But it wasn't my fault. Someone falsified records using my credentials. There was a pause. That's a serious accusation, Sophia said carefully. I know. And I can prove it. If you want to see the evidence, I have it. Another pause. Then, actually, I'm going to forward your file to someone. His name is Daniel Cross. He's a senior executive, and he's specifically looking for compliance specialists. He used to work at Meridian before he left. I think you two should talk. My breath caught. Daniel Cross. I remembered that name from Meridian's directory. He'd been a VP, but he'd departed about 2 years ago. Suddenly. No announcement. No goodbye lunch. Daniel Cross's office was on the 15th floor of a downtown building that screamed old money and serious business. When I walked in, he was waiting. Mid-50s. Gray at the temples. The kind of calm that comes from someone who's seen every kind of human deception and isn't impressed by any of it. Sit, he said, not as an invitation but a fact. Sophia says you were set up, he said, not wasting time. Walk me through it. And don't leave anything out. So I did. I showed him my data. The IP addresses. The timestamps. The contracts. Pattern. Everything. He didn't interrupt. He didn't gasp or show shock. He just listened, his eyes moving from my evidence to my face and back again, cataloging everything. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Who accessed your credentials? He asked. My brother. I'm almost certain. Almost. I can prove the location. I can prove the timing. I can prove someone used my login to create fraudulent files. But I don't have direct evidence of him sitting at a computer and typing the commands himself. He nodded slowly. His jaw tightened just slightly. That's okay, he said quietly. Because someone else will. Daniel offered me a job 2 days later. Probationary role, he said, sliding a contract across his desk. Head of Compliance Review. You'll report directly to me. Higher pay. More visibility. And, he looked directly at me, you'll oversee external consultants and vendor audits. I understood immediately what he was offering. Access. Position. Power. Why are you doing this? Yes. Because I left Meridian 3 years ago because I couldn't prove what was happening in that company. And I've been curious ever since. He tapped my evidence folder. Now you've given me a reason to look again. But I need you inside the system first. I need you somewhere you can legally gather information. I started the next Monday. My brother didn't know yet. He probably thought I was still working coffee shifts, slowly sinking into despair. But his world was about to get very, very small. My first assignment was to review vendor histories and external consultant contracts. Specifically, I was told to focus on firms that had been flagged in audits but never formally investigated. Took me exactly 17 minutes to find CrossPath Solutions in the system. There it was. My brother's company. Listed as a vendor since 4 years ago. But they'd only had major activity in the past year. And their contract was flagged multiple times with notation, pending investigation, deferred. I pulled up every file CrossPath had submitted, every report, every invoice. The first thing I noticed was the invoices didn't match the deliverables. My brother was billing for 40 hours of work but submitting 15 hours of actual consulting reports. The discrepancy was systematic, month after month. The second thing I noticed was the access logs. Consultants were logging in with credentials that appeared to be shared. Each person should have their own login. Shared credentials are how people hide who did what. I created a detailed analysis. Everything documented. Everything tagged. Everything ready. And then I waited for my boss to assign me as the lead reviewer for a formal audit. Took 3 weeks. My mother called me one evening. "Adrian is doing well," she said carefully. "He wanted to have a family dinner. He said he's been worried about you." Worried about me. I almost said no. But I needed to see him. I needed to watch his face when I was near him, before he knew what was coming. I needed to understand the man who'd betrayed me. We met at a neutral restaurant. Adrian was already there, at a table in the corner. He looked relaxed, confident. The kind of man who'd gotten away with something and knew it. "Evelyn," he said, standing to hug me. "You look better. I'm glad you're doing okay." I sat down without hugging him back. "I got a new job," I said quietly. He smiled. "That's good. What is it?" "Another coffee shop. Compliance review. At North Crest." For a microsecond, just a flicker, his expression changed. Then it was back to the easy smile. "Oh, that's nice. Congratulations." "Actually, I'm working on vendor audits," I said, watching his face carefully. "External consultant contracts. You know, firms that do compliance work." His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Interesting," he said, but his voice had changed. It had lost the easy confidence. "Very interesting," I agreed. "Actually, I've been looking at a lot of old contracts, finding patterns, inconsistencies." He set down his fork. "Well," he said, and his smile had turned into something sharp, "I'm sure you'll figure out whatever mysteries you're chasing. You always were good at puzzles." He thought he was untouchable. That was his mistake. I spent the next 2 weeks analyzing every transaction. The invoices didn't match deliverables. That was obvious. But it went deeper. I pulled CrossPath's billing records and compared them to their actual submitted work. Over a single year, my brother had overbilled Meridian by approximately $67,000. But the overbilling was just the beginning. I pulled the access logs for all the times CrossPath consultants had logged into Meridian's compliance system. Most of the major file changes didn't match the work submitted in their reports. Then I found it. A pattern in the timestamps. The files that were being changed, the ones that had gotten me fired, they matched the timing of when one of CrossPath's junior consultants had logged in. I didn't have a name attached to that consultant yet. But I had everything else. IP addresses, login credentials, exact timing, exact files modified. I created a comprehensive audit report. 30 pages of evidence, invoices, logs, analysis, timeline, everything documented. Then I locked it in an encrypted folder and sent copies to 3 separate secure locations. Daniel found me in my cubicle the next morning. "You ready?" he asked quietly. I looked up at him and nodded. "Then let's finish this." Daniel's office was quiet when he closed the door. He'd read my report. All 30 pages. His expression was stone. "This is fraud," he said finally. "Systematic, documented, deliberate fraud." "Yes. And you can prove it. Completely." He stood and walked to his window, looking out at the city below. When he turned back, his eyes were harder than I'd ever seen them. "Are you ready for what comes next?" he asked. "Because once we file this audit officially, there's no taking it back. Your brother's business will collapse. Your family's going to be devastated. And you're going to be the one who did it." I thought about sleeping in my car. I thought about Adrian throwing my boxes down the stairs. I thought about my mother turning away from me in the kitchen window. I thought about the humiliation, the betrayal, the theft of my career. "I'm ready," I said. He nodded once. "Then we proceed tomorrow." The email hit my brother's inbox at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Notice of formal compliance audit. Cross-path solutions. It was professional. It was specific. It outlined the scope of the investigation, the documents required, the timeline for response. My brother called me at 9:15 a.m. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice tight. I didn't answer. I'd promised myself I wouldn't. Not until it was over. "Evelyn, answer me." I hung up and blocked his number. He texted my mother. She called me frantically. "What's going on? Adrian is saying something about an audit. Did you do something?" I turned off my phone. By the time I turned it back on that evening, there were 23 missed calls, 14 text messages, 2 voicemails from my mother. I read through them once, carefully, and then I deleted them all. This was the moment where most people would feel guilty, where they'd second-guess themselves. But I felt something different. Felt clean. 3 days later, my brother showed up at my office. He marched past security and found me at my desk. His face was red. His hands were shaking. But what struck me most was the arrogance. Even facing disaster, he thought he could talk his way out of it. "You did this," he said, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "You're trying to ruin me because you lost your job." People were staring now. Phones were lowering. This was about to become office gossip. "This is a formal investigation," I said calmly. "Not a personal vendetta. You've got a personal vendetta. You always did. You were jealous of me, of my success. And now you're—" "Mr. Price," Daniel said, appearing beside me. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Unless you have documentation showing you're here in an official capacity." Adrian turned to him, his anger shifting to desperation. "I'm here to address serious bias in an investigation into my company. My sister works here. She has a clear conflict of interest and a clear motive to." "Do you have documentation?" Daniel repeated, his voice calm but unmovable. "What?" "Documentation. Written proof of bias. Any formal complaint filed with HR." Adrian opened his mouth, closed it. He hadn't filed anything. He'd come here thinking he could intimidate and charm his way through this. "That's what I thought," Daniel said. "Security will see you out." As Adrian was being escorted away, he turned back and looked at me. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. The breakthrough came from someone inside CrossPath. A junior consultant named Trevor requested whistleblower protection from Northcrest. Trevor was young, 24. He'd been excited to work for CrossPath. He'd thought my brother was a mentor. In his affidavit, a signed legal statement, Trevor detailed everything. He explained how he'd been asked to use a shared login to access Meridian systems. He explained how he'd been given specific instructions on which files to review and how to approve them, even though he had no actual expertise in those areas. Most damaging of all, he explained that my brother had explicitly told him, "We're creating the problems. Then we bill them for the solutions. It's foolproof as long as we control the narrative." That statement, those exact words, that was the smoking gun. Everything suddenly made sense. The false compliance failures, The emergency consulting contract, the inflated invoices, the shared credentials. All of it was designed to make it look like Meridian had a compliance problem that only CrossPath could fix. And I was the collateral damage. The presentation happened in a conference room on the 20th floor. It was the kind of room that existed purely for important decisions. Long mahogany table, glass walls overlooking the city. Meridian's board members, their legal team, their senior executives, and me sitting beside Daniel, with every single piece of evidence laid out. He walked through it methodically. Timeline, the invoices, the access logs, the system modifications, the billing discrepancies, the whistleblower statement. When he finished, he placed a single document in the center of the table. This is a written recommendation for immediate contract termination, criminal referral to federal authorities, and full financial recovery. Based on the evidence presented, CrossPath Solutions has committed systematic fraud totaling approximately $180,000. One of the board members looked at me. "And you discovered all of this how?" she asked. "By gathering evidence that had been hidden," I said. "By proving that someone had stolen my login credentials. By showing that all the compliance failures attributed to me were actually committed by someone using my access. By documenting it all carefully." They voted. Unanimous. My name was officially cleared. My termination was officially reversed. And my brother's company was officially in free fall. What happened next took less than 2 weeks. Meridian released a brief statement about vendor contract termination due to compliance violations. They didn't name CrossPath specifically, but the news spread. The compliance industry is small. People talk. Clients started pulling away. Quietly at first. Then not quietly. Banks froze CrossPath's credit reviews. The company had been counting on a $200,000 line of credit. That was gone. My brother posted confident messages on LinkedIn. Nobody believed him. Everyone could see the panic underneath the words. His investors, 3 people who'd bankrolled his early growth, called an emergency meeting. Then they demanded their money back. By day 12, my brother's world had effectively ended. His company was dissolving. His reputation was destroyed. His future was a legal minefield. And he knew exactly who was responsible. He showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday evening. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usual expensive clothes were wrinkled. His hair hadn't been combed. There was something broken about him. "Can we talk?" he asked. I let him in because I wanted to see this. I wanted to watch him try to navigate a situation he couldn't charm or manipulate his way through. "I made mistakes," he said, sitting on my couch like a visitor in his own life. "Serious mistakes. I was under stress, and I made terrible decisions." "You framed me," I said calmly. "You stole my credentials. You used them to commit fraud. You got me fired so you could take credit for fixing the problem you created." "I know. And I'm sorry. I was desperate. My business was struggling and I saw an opportunity and You destroyed my career." "I know, and I'm trying to tell you that I'm sorry. That I want to make it right." I looked at my brother, this man who was supposed to protect me, and I felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No redemption. Just emptiness. "You can't make it right," I said. "What you did was too big. Too deliberate. Too calculated. You made a choice. And now you're living with the consequences of that choice." He left my apartment an hour later, tears streaming down his face. I never heard from him again. The federal investigation took 4 months. Fraud charges were filed against my brother and CrossPath Solutions. Charges for wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. The regulatory fines were substantial. CrossPath was hit with a $300,000 penalty. My brother personally faced an additional $150,000 in civil liability. His professional licenses were pulled. He was banned from the industry. Meridian's board voted to pursue full recovery of all fraudulent billings, plus damages. His assets were frozen. His house went into foreclosure. His cars were seized to cover legal fees. I watched it happen from my new office, where my title now read Head of Compliance. I didn't watch it with joy. I watched it with the understanding that he'd done this to himself. 6 months after the audit, Meridian made an official announcement. They reversed my termination. They issued a written apology for the way I'd been treated. They offered me a settlement, 6 months of back pay, plus damages for wrongful termination. The memo went company-wide. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone knew that I'd been cleared. My brother received a copy of that memo, forwarded by someone who knew it would destroy him. I imagine he read the words. Ms. Price's termination was the result of fraud perpetrated by external parties. We regret the harm caused to her career and reputation. Ms. Price has been reinstated with full benefits and seniority recognition. I imagine he understood in that moment that he'd lost everything trying to destroy someone who'd been stronger than he could ever be. 3 months later, I was at an industry conference in San Francisco. It was a hospitality and compliance event. Hundreds of professionals from the financial sector. My brother was there. I saw him across the conference floor, and my stomach tightened. He looked worse than I'd imagined. Thinner, older, hollowed out. He was desperately trying to work the room, trying to network, trying to convince people that he was still relevant. Nobody was interested. Then Daniel walked over to me. "Evelyn," he said, his hand settling on my shoulder. "Great work today on that compliance panel. You were articulate, authoritative, professional." He said it loud enough for people around us to hear. "Thank you," I said. He extended his hand to a group of executives who'd been watching. "Everyone, I want to introduce you to Evelyn Price. She's our head of compliance here at Northcrest, and she's one of the finest auditors I've ever worked with." The executives crowded around us, interested, impressed, wanting to connect. Across the room, my brother watched. I could see the moment he understood. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. And he was invisible. Over the next 6 months, my brother's world completely dissolved. His company officially dissolved. His business partners walked away. His investors sued him. He moved back into my mother's house, a broken man living in his childhood bedroom, waiting for a criminal trial. I heard these things from my mother during the one phone call we had. She cried. She apologized. "I'm sorry," my mother said again. "I know," I replied. "But apologies don't change what happened." And I meant it. 1 year after that terrible day when my brother threw my belongings down the driveway, I bought a house. It's nothing fancy. A small Victorian in a quiet neighborhood. But it's mine. I have the deed. Have the keys. I have the understanding that I built this with my own effort, my own intelligence, my own courage. I sleep peacefully in that house. Without fear. Without doubt. My brother is facing federal charges. His trial is scheduled for next year. But I don't think about him anymore. Instead, I think about this. The people who throw you out at your lowest point never expect to meet you again at your highest. They expect you to stay down. They expect you to be broken. They don't expect you to get up, dust off the dirt, and become someone they could never reach, no matter how hard they tried. Silence isn't weakness. Patience is power. And revenge doesn't need noise. It doesn't need drama or vindication or apologies. Revenge is simply this. You build a better life. You become a better version of yourself. And you leave them behind, standing in the wreckage of what they destroyed, realizing too late what they lost when they threw you out. I am Evelyn Price. I survived my brother's betrayal. I built my own future. And I will never stop moving forward.